Hi, my name is Steve Kohlreiter, and I'm a resident of Washington Township, and I'm going to discuss my time in the United States Navy during the Vietnam War. But before I can tell you that, I got to tell you the times that we were in back then. I graduated Fort Lee High School in 1968 during very turbulent times, and the Vietnam War was very much a hot spot in the United States and around the world. It was a very, very unpopular war, and most of us did everything we could to avoid going into the war. And back then, what you did, because there was a draft, and if you weren't going to college, you were going to get drafted. So I was not a great student, but so I got to Bergen Community College, and my sole purpose for going there at the time was to avoid the draft. Went to Bergen Community College for 1 year, did pretty well, held my own, actually did very well, except for one minor. I flunked art appreciation, which was like, art appreciation, what is this? So they told me I'd have to make it up, and I got very upset by this. And in a fit of frustration, I slammed my fist on the dinner table and says, I'm going in. I'm wasting my time, I'm going to school, I shouldn't even be in school, but I'm doing this to avoid the draft, I'm joining. So, my parents like, you're crazy, but okay. So I went down and I went to the Navy recruiting station in Teaneck, and I joined under what they call the Cache program. Interestingly enough, what that meant was a 6-month delay. This is what they were doing then. You signed the papers, you did everything you were supposed to do, but you weren't going in for 6 months. And I did this in July. During the 6 months, Congress proposed a bill, passed legislation, and just said, we're going to have a lottery to eliminate the draft. Now, I had already committed to the Navy. And a week before I went in, they had the lottery, and my ball came out to 335. I wouldn't have gone. So my father says, are you okay? I says, I'm okay with this. I'm good. So I went to boot camp in January 6th of the year 1970, Great Lakes, Illinois. Coldest place I've ever been in my life. If you think it's cold here, you have no idea what cold is. And I got to Great Lakes, and I was going through the normal basic training there. I couldn't understand why the Navy had a place like this in the middle of the country, not near the ocean, not near any ships. I figured they were just messing with our minds. It was a very cold day when they called us in to put in the request what kind of schooling we want to go to. What would you like to be when you're in the Navy, when you get out of boot camp? It was about 5 below zero that day, and the guy looks up to me and says, son, how would you like to go to Florida? Yep, sign me up. I don't care what it is. I'm going to Florida. So he says, you're going to go to Communications Technician School in Pensacola, Florida. I says, great. So when I got out of boot camp, I got through that. I was happy about that. I got to Pensacola, Florida, and so far all I've had in the Navy was boot camp, which is no fun for anybody. I get to Pensacola, and it was on a Sunday, and I check in with the officer of the day, and I says, I'm here to report. He says, that's nice. Then he was looking down, he's reading the newspaper. I said, well, what do I do now? He says, oh, you go across the street, there's a linen locker over there, find yourself a bunk. And then I said to him, well, what do I do after that? And then he looks at me, he goes, I don't give a damn what you do. I go, yes, sir, I'm in heaven. You mean I can go off base? Yeah, you can go off base. Just make sure you're back here for school. You can do whatever you want. This was like a man free from everything. So I was real pleased with that. So the first day they were telling us what we were doing, and they were going to teach us the Morse code. And by the way, you're going to get a top secret security clearance. So you got to fill out all these papers, and they're going to do a big investigative work on you, and this is going to take upwards of 6 months to get your clearance. This is a very, very big deal. But they didn't tell us why. So I went to school, learned the Morse code, and they had a very, very good system of helping you want to do well. At the end of the week, on a Friday morning, they had a speed test. And they did it like A, da, da, A, da, da, and they just pounded into you, B, dot, da, dit, dot, da, dit. And this is what you did for 8 hours a day for the first week. By the end of the week, you knew the Morse code, and for the next few weeks, all it was speed. On Friday morning, they would say, okay, we're going to take a test. If you pass the test, you're done for the day, go to the beach. If you don't pass the test, you're going to be running around with the full armor on, and you're going to run around the grinder. So it's up to you. You guys want to pass, you guys want to fail. I was at the beach every Friday. And then we got to the advanced portion of the school, and then they put us in with typewriters with Russian characters on it. And they said, you guys are going to be obviously intercepting part of what you're doing, the Russians. Got through the school, and 3/4 of the way through the school, they said, you got to put in for your dream sheet. They call it a dream sheet, 3 places that you might want to be stationed. I was a little disappointed to find out that most of the guys that were in this class to do what I did were not on ships. They were mostly land-based. I joined the Navy. I didn't join the Army, but I'll go with it. The places that everybody wanted to go was what we all put in for. Etzel, Scotland, San Vito, Italy, and Rota, Spain. This is where we all wanted to go. And so we all put in for this. And the place we didn't want to go was Adak, Alaska, which is in the Aleutian Islands, way out in there. And someplace, Diego Garcia, in little island off of India, in the middle of nowhere. Nobody even ever heard of the place. So the day the orders came in, the instructor said, okay, so-and-so, Adak, so-and-so, all my friends, Adak, Adak, Adak. Then he comes, Kohlreiter, and my heart just sunk. Because in Adak, they said there's a girl behind every tree. The problem is there's no trees. He looks up, he says, what happened to you? You're going to Honolulu. Honolulu, Hawaii. I didn't even think about that place. So I was like, ecstasy, I'm going to Hawaii. I went to the Enlisted Man's Club that night, and they had Hawaii 5-0 on the TV, and it was like, oh, wow, this is going to be awesome. So I get to Hawaii, and our base was in the middle of Oahu, near a place called Schofield Barracks. It was the Naval Communication Station of Honolulu, which is right near there. And you know, when I got off the airplane at Hickam Air Force Base, I was waiting, you know, for the girl to put the lay around Elvis Presley to come over to me and lay the thing around. No, there was none of that. There was no greeting committee. But I got there, and you know, I made myself comfortable, and they had about a mile out the antenna array where we worked, and all I kept hearing about was from these guys that, oh, you got to go get on the ship, we got to go to the Philippines, we got to go to Hong Kong, that's where the action is. And I kept hearing this. And then one night, one of the guys came back and he says, they're looking for 6 guys to go to the Philippines on temporary duty for 6 months. I'm in. I go running up. I didn't even wait for a ride. I ran a mile to get to this thing. I signed up, me and 5 other guys. I said, we want this. We want this. I said, you got it. So it was a couple of weeks went by, and we had a new division officer come on, and I had the midnight shift, but it was an all-hands meeting afterwards. So at 7:30 in the morning, the division officer is saying, we got some exciting new things coming up here. We got 6 guys going to Southeast Asia, among some of the things that are going on here. And this is rattling around my brain. I'm saying, Southeast Asia. Every time I hear Southeast Asia, I don't hear Philippines, even though it's over there. I'm here in Vietnam. So that night I have the midnight shift again. I go, Chief, am I going to the Philippines or am I going to Vietnam? I bluntly asked him. He says, both. You're going to the Philippines on your way to Vietnam. I says, I didn't sign up for that. He says, well, that's the way it is. I says, okay, I got tricked into this. But I really wasn't that upset by it. I got to the Philippines. We spent a couple of weeks in training, and I was kind of excited about this Vietnam thing. That's all I kept hearing about was Vietnam, 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 always on the news. I kind of want to see for myself what this is all about. So we go down to Clark Air Force Base to fly in on a C-141, and we're going to land in Da Nang. Da Nang's the main air base there. And while we're waiting a few hours for our flight, the Stars and Stripes, which is the military newspaper, comes out. And there was like big carnage at Da Nang that day, and they were just showing pictures of this in the newspaper. I'm like, I'm starting to get a little queasy about this. We get to Da Nang, and I see all kinds of soldiers and stuff, and I see guys that were wounded, and I see just a bunch of guys, and now I'm waiting for, we're going to get on a smaller plane, go from Da Nang to a place called Phu Bai. This is where I was going to be stationed for the next supposedly 90 days. So we get to Phu Bai, and the barracks were made, and you can see it, the one barracks is in here, was from the French. This is when the French were in Vietnam. This whole base was built by the French back in the 50s. And the very first day, they handed us M16s. I had never fired an M16. I was in the Navy. And we had our camouflage uniforms and everything on, and it was a Marine gunny sergeant. He says, okay, guys, you guys got your weapons? There's two positions on an M16, semi-automatic and automatic. He says, I want you to put it on automatic. He says, I want you to pull the trigger and just let it go. He says, okay, now that you guys did this, you never, ever, 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 ever to do that again. I wanted you to get the feel of this, because if you panic with it in automatic, you're going to blow all your ammunition, and then you're going to get yourself in some deep trouble here. It's like, whoa, what am I in for here? So we had the M16s handed it to us. It's an Army base, and this is all Army guys doing what I'm doing. They're all intercepting Morse code. They have their rooms, but the Navy had their own rooms set up on this base, and we were intercepting what we were supposed to do. And we were listening to, the Russians, we were listening to the Chinese, but mostly the Vietnamese. And this stuff was gathered. Most of it was encrypted. I had no idea what most of it was, and it was sent to higher places for interpretation. So while we're in Vietnam, every morning I would walk into the command center, and it was where all the intelligence reports or where the enemy was. And across the base from where we were was the Phu Bai airfield. Now, if you're looking at a map of Vietnam, really what we were was the air base for the city of Hue, which was the old imperial capital. I think we were about 80 miles from the DMZ. The northernmost city was Quang Tri, and then there was Hue, and there was, during the Tet Offensive, back in a couple of years before I went in, Hue was nasty. There was some horrible fighting going on there. So this is where our base was. And you'd hear the B-52s dropping the bombs every night. You'd hear the M-75s going off. You didn't know if it was incoming or outgoing, because the concussion from even our guns going off was boom, boom, boom. So anyway, every morning I'd go into the command center before my watch, and I'd look at the maps to see where the enemy was. And the enemy was all around us. It was like, this is unbelievable. But that's what it is. You say, well, if they wanted to take us, I'm sure they could. Maybe they're getting more out of us than we're getting out of them, but we were sitting ducks if they ever really wanted to. Twice a month, everybody had to go up in the guard tower by the ammo dump and stand watch all night. So it would be me and a Marine. And when I was in the tower, we'd just looking out, and then when the sun went down, we would take 2-hour shifts of taking a nap. I also brought a transistor radio with me, and we had Armed Forces Vietnam network. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll never forget this, I'm up in the tower, and I turn on the Armed Forces radio, and who do I hear but Phil Rizzuto calling a Yankee game. And this was like, oh my God, Phil Rizzuto's with me my whole life. And it was the most comforting thing I ever happened. An hour later, shells went into the base I was stationed at. And when we came back the next morning, guys were looking at us, we thought you was dead. We got back there, we had quite a few times they would shoot at us. Hand-to-hand combat, nothing like that, no. I mean, these guys didn't come in anything like that. But interestingly enough, there were ARVN, Army Republic of Vietnam guys working on our base during the day. And we really thought that these guys were double dealing, that they would work in the day and the night they become the Viet Cong and the enemy. And I'm convinced of that to this day, and so was everybody else. I guess they had these guys maybe on just to keep an eye on them. I mean, I think it was, you never knew who the enemy was. You never ever knew who, I mean, the lady that came in to clean for us and all that, you knew she was, no good. I mean, there was nothing but trouble, and you can never rest assured. The only day that anybody rested there that felt at peace was when a typhoon came through, and it was pretty nasty. And you knew nobody was fighting that day, not even the enemy. They weren't shooting in this weather. On my 85th day of my 90-day tour, they came back and says, oh, by the way, you're staying another 3 months. Oh, thank you, as they were cutting down the days. When I got back from Vietnam, I went back to Hawaii, and they needed a couple of guys to do what I do, to fly to San Diego and ride an aircraft carrier. My first one was the USS Kitty Hawk from San Diego Naval Station to Subic Bay in the Philippines. Sole purpose of this trip was only as a backup. All they wanted was as a backup. The Russians would always have an overflight of our aircraft carriers crossing the Pacific, and if the radio transmission went down, we were supposed to, do the Morse code. So if everything was up and running, we had no job for 10 days crossing whatever it was to cross the Pacific. My recollection of Vietnam was where I was, it was dry and dusty, a hot place. It was just not pleasant. I wasn't allowed to ever leave the base because I had a top secret security clearance, and they were afraid of any of us ever being captured, it would be trouble. So we were never allowed to leave the base. We were never allowed to be out of sight of these guys, our guys. So I didn't get to travel around the country. The closest I got to that was when we were leaving the country. We all had to fly to Saigon to take a drug test because they were starting to have a problem with drugs, and everybody had to take a drug test. We were there for 5 days, and they were having the elections in South Vietnam at the time, and so we weren't even allowed to go into Saigon during this. I was real glad to get out of there. So when I got back, but I wasn't done with Vietnam. I was done inside of Vietnam, but I wasn't done with Vietnam. When I got transferred to the Oklahoma City, we went on an actual mission into Haiphong, right into the main naval shipping port of North Vietnam. And we were shooting at them, and they were shooting at us, and we got hit a couple of times, and that's how I got my combat action ribbon with everybody else on the ship from that night. And it was a pretty hairy experience. So from there you can see, we were shooting lob and shells, and mostly we were shooting guided missiles into these guys. And you hear the missiles go off all the time, and you can just watch them land, and you can watch the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese army, because we were now near North Vietnam. And we could actually see the movements right from the ship. We weren't that, maybe a couple of miles off the coast. Veterans Day and Memorial Day mean two different things to me. Memorial Day is, we're honoring those that made the ultimate sacrifice. I didn't. I made it back. Everybody I know made it back. Or everybody you see in town in the VFW. We all made it back. We grew up. We had wives and families and kids, and we're living our dreams out. So many guys didn't. They died. In the prime of their life, and it was taken away from them. And it's sad, obviously, that they didn't get to live their lives, but what it left to their families, the pain that was resulting from this, or still results from this, and you wonder why. You question, especially the Vietnam War, because nobody's ever explained to us what that war was for. In fact, the Secretary of Defense at the time, Robert McNamara, who later, a few years ago, admitted it was a big mistake. It's not like what happened in World War II, where Pearl Harbor was hit, or even 9/11. They attacked us. The guys went in, and, well, we're going to get even with these guys. We weren't getting even with the Vietnamese. We really never quite understood what that was. But Memorial Day is to remember and reflect on the dead, and never, ever, ever take it for granted what these guys did for us. Because if they didn't do that for us, we wouldn't have what we have right now.